Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the IT Pro broadcast where we talk about all things Skype for Business. I'm Paul Cannon, Senior Product Marketing Manager for Skype for Business, and today we're going to talk about one of our most important base topics, network readiness and network assessments. And joining me today from the faraway land of Amsterdam is Cornel. Oh, Cornel, I just realized I forgot to ask you how to say your last name. I'm going to mess this up, aren't I? Cornel Boelens. How did I do, Cornel?
You tried. Let's just keep it that way. Good evening.
Yeah, I knew I was going to murder your name.
No, that's fine.
Great to have you on the cast. Can you go ahead and talk to us a little bit about what you do for Microsoft?
Sure. So I'm Cornel Boelens. I'm a senior program manager for our customer experience and engineering team. So, it's always hard to describe. So usually I tell my mom I do computers. That's usually good enough for her. So in my day-to-day activities for Microsoft, I work together with some of my brilliant colleagues, and we think of ways to make the experience with Skype for Business better from a networking perspective. So I work with some very talented people that are building things like our network assessment tools, and I work with some other colleagues that help us actually raise awareness for customers on how to properly scale their networks, what they need to take care of when they want to run Skype for Business, or any real-time modality really inside the network. Things like how do you calculate that bandwidth? How do you properly put QoS tags on that and things like that? So that's basically my day-to-day job.
Great. Thanks for that. Yeah, I know that you are like one of those people that are the silent but super important person to the success of Skype for Business at any site. So today we're going to talk about network assessments. Now, you've done like one or two of these?
Yeah, I've done two. So I like how you called me silent. I've never been called that before, so that's pretty cool.
I think that's more of a hope than an actual description.
There we go. That you wouldn't be the first one to tell me that. As a bit of a history, I worked for a bunch of networking companies, for a Microsoft partner as well. I've got a strong background in networking. I started off with Cisco equipment, of course. Haven't we all? And then from there, I worked my way. I want to say worked my way up, but it sounds so degrading to Cisco. I worked my way in a different direction, and I've used a lot of that experience from that I got from all that time spent with inside the networking world to start executing on a lot of the network assessments that Microsoft has been doing. So I think over time, I've done about 400 or 500 of these network assessments during my time at Microsoft Consultancy Services. For those that are familiar, we'll look at some of those slides today. For the Network Readiness Assessment, that is part of the Skype Operations Framework. A large portion of that was written by me, and it's all based on the industry standards of those network assessments. And as I said, I think by now I can dream them. I can write materials for it, which I did. So I think we're now, I think the ones that I've actually done is like 200-300 of them, and I think a couple of hundred that I was either consulting on or training people on.
That's right. So I think you told me right before we started this that you've been involved in nearly 500
Yep.
network assessments, which is amazing. And so I think we definitely have the right person on the call today to talk about this topic. So why don't we just jump right in, Cornel? And I think we should cut on over to the slides, and we'll walk through a few slides, and then we'll start taking questions. We have our good buddy in the background who's checking the Q&A, so everyone make sure you go ahead and do that. We do also have pulse questions appearing in the broadcast, and so go ahead and please respond to those. Those help us shape the future of the broadcast, so it's really helpful we know who's out there and what you're interested in. Take it away, Cornel.
Great. So I really liked how you described Mariusz Ostrowski as your buddy to ensure that you didn't butcher another name. So we're doing great there. Just to be sure, Mariusz Ostrowski is helping us answer some of the questions on network readiness assessments. For those that have questions around bandwidth calculations, he's your guy for that. So I'm sure we're going to get hate IMs from him over this, but absolutely, this is he's the expert on that. So for me, I just really wanted to take you through a couple of slides that will show you basically some of the things how we feel you can get your network ready for Skype for Business. This is all taken from the Skype Operations Framework content, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you have on that. That's what today's for.
Hey, and by the way, yes. I'm sorry to interrupt you for a moment. Just a couple of things. One, we're getting some feedback that your volume is a little low. We're doing all we can from the studio, but if you could adjust your mic level, that would be great. And then let's shoot for pretty short, tight answers here and everything. That would be great, so we could keep the show flowing and let people will get back to their day. So thank you, buddy.
Great. I can talk louder. I don't know if I can really adjust my volume, so we'll do that. So if we can go to the slides, and we'll quickly walk through the slides and leave a lot of time for questions.
Excellent.
So I'm going to press, there we go. I'm going to press the video and content button. There we go. So the Network Readiness Assessment. What I really wanted to talk about is that whenever you're implementing any real-time communication solution, and some of you are experimenting with Teams, so I just want to make sure that you do realize that when you're working with any real-time communication platform, this absolutely applies, whether this is Skype for Business or whether this is Microsoft Teams. It's absolutely important for you to go in and to spend time on making sure that your network is up to date. Why do we want to test this? We want to make sure that when we go in and we test the network and we test for any possible challenges like high packet loss or high delay, this is definitely something that you want to know up front. If you know this up front, this will really avoid the portion where you get all those hate mails from people saying, well, great that we're using Skype for Business for our telephony solution, but every call has been terrible since then. So that's absolutely something that you need to test up front to reduce those risks that you're running. Skype for Business for your telephony, Microsoft Teams for a nice team call, something like that. That's absolutely critical that they have decent network quality. Real-time communication is very sensitive to network quality. If there's a 500 millisecond delay, that's going to be terrible for your call.
Yeah, definitely.
Know this up front.
So question for you. When we typically do these network assessments, what is a common element that is discovered? What is, do you guys have a very short list of the top issues? Yes.
People overestimating their network. I think that's the number one. I think on a very highly ranked number two is people not knowing what the network is actually. Whenever you ask, the running joke that we have is whenever we ask a customer, hey, do you have a network drawing? Of course I do. I can get it to you in 5 minutes. And that 5 minutes is usually 5 days. And it's always interesting. For some reason, it looks like it was drawn in a couple of days because they didn't have it.
Is it done with crayon on it sometimes? Or?
I'm just happy it wasn't done in crayon whenever I get them. It's the and when people are overestimating their network, it's usually because they always say our internet connection is going to be a problem. It almost never is. And they say, but our network works well. We get our email, we get our SharePoint. That works great. So yeah, we can do real-time communication. And then when we start testing it, we actually find out that the internet pipe is fine, they can do that, and everybody can imagine that if you have 100 meg of data, if you need 100 Mbit, if you've got a 50 Mbit pipe, that's not going to work. But when it comes to the internal network, they're like, oh yeah, we've got like a bunch of access points that I sort of borrowed from my grandma, and they work fine. So they can get emails, so Skype for Business is going to work fine. We can do real-time communication now. And then we test it, and it turns out that actually when 50 people are on one access point, that's not going to work. And those are the things we typically find out, that people are massively overestimating the network that they have, underestimating their internet connectivity, and that they actually don't really know how the traffic flows inside their network.
It feels like to me that when you go to the network team and ask them and tell them about their network, it's sort of like going to your son's school and telling all the other kids they're kind of slow. It just never works out well for you.
No, you make great friends when. Yeah, you make great friends when you're doing network assessments because you talk to the people that have been saying to the manager, no, everything works great, everything is working fantastic, and turns out portions don't. So when we're doing these network assessments and we're talking about network readiness, it's not about, at least for me, and I hope for our valued partners, it's the same deal. It's not about telling the customer they've done a poor job. It's telling the customer, hey, you've done a great job so far. We can make it better. Once you're using that network heavily for real-time communication, it's going to change the way it's actually used. And let's make sure that instead of getting complaints, we're going to find out what will the impact be, and how can you make sure that your users will be happy and can make use of the network. So some of the high-level network readiness overview. Let's just talk a little bit about that. This is basically it's a very much how any network assessment should be done. Whether you have one, whether it's a partner doing this, whether it's I don't care, whether it's Cisco, whether it's an independent vendor, whether it's Microsoft, you'd always get this kind of flow, right? We go in like we ask them, so what do you have? Which is kickoff, data collection, assessment workshops, like what do you have right now? Then you have a portion which saying, well, we think that when you're going in this direction, this is what's going to happen. There's some test run, and then you go to stage 3, which is usually okay, we tested this, we talked about this is what's going to happen to your network, this is what we believe will happen to the quality, this is what you should change. It's and then of course once that's done, we'll start all over again because stuff tends to change, which is what we're really trying to uncover, right? So we're trying to uncover what's going to happen, what could be a potential problem, what should you change moving forward, what should you basically focus on. You're telling your customer things like, this is how you should do QoS. This is, it seems that your wired network is performing flawlessly, but your Wi-Fi is having issues. Let's focus on Wi-Fi. Maybe we need to do a Wi-Fi assessment, things like that. Those are really the things that are coming up for those from those assessments. And the important thing in the end, and that's really why we're doing this, we want to make sure that when there are issues, and this ties back into the unveil risk areas, when you move into operate and when you move into running a great real-time communication structure, that you're basically already hands-on with any potential issues there might be.
It's interesting you mentioned wireless. Because typically what I've seen and heard from customers is that's usually the first place they start struggling a little bit with their network, and they typically overestimate how strong their wireless coverage is.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is something we see over and over. And what you see is that a lot of customers, they're actually they're using their network, and they bought a network like 4 or 5 years ago, way before they were thinking about real-time communication. Now they're going into real-time communication, and just because I can copy a Windows Server ISO from a server over the wireless network with 100 meg per second doesn't mean that that same network is going to support my Skype for Business conference call, and that's really a very common thing that we see at our customers, where they just see, well, it's working, I can get email, so Skype for Business is working, should be working as well. And while we're definitely not saying that you should really rip everything out and build a complete network, we are trying to raise awareness that data is a very different beast than real-time communication. One of the things that ties in really nicely with that is our traffic simulation. So we've made sure that we have a Microsoft Network Readiness Assessment tool, which is of course free to download, and you can actually run on different machines in your network, and it will tell you that it's a modified version of the Skype for Business client, for lack of a better description, and it basically, I can go into the nitty-gritty details, but then you talk all over me and you tell me, no, let's move on, Cornel.
But I would do that regardless, Cornel.
That is true. It basically emulates the behavior of a Skype for Business client and uses our media stack in the backend, and then we place these calls, and we can test the network, and we can test what the performance of Skype for Business would be. And the nice thing about it, because the tool behaves in the same way as Skype for Business would, is if that tool reports that it's going to be great, the chances that it is going to be great are very high.
That is so cool. The whole idea that we're actually running traffic simulation on a network, I had no idea, to be honest, that was part of our network assessment until you told me about it this morning. So that really gives a lot of great data, I bet.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's and then this ties back into the Skype Operations Framework that we have. It's an essential part of this, and we actually train our partners, our customers, and people that are running these network readiness assessments. We absolutely want you to run that traffic simulation. It's an essential part, a required part of testing any network, because the paper exercise is great. It will give you a lot of insight, a lot of things that you should be doing, but actually testing that network and actually testing how it will perform will definitely give it an additional validity of what you're doing. So we're really recommending it to test any site that you have to ensure that you have that you're ready to start using a Skype for Business or any real-time communication tool. So the one thing that is important, so we actually have a bunch of published networking targets. You can find it at the aka.ms URL. You can run this on any PC that's running Windows 7 or Server 2008 or higher. We do use the same ports and protocols, so you don't have to do weird stuff like, oh, we want you to open this obscure port. No. It will use the same ports and protocols as Skype for Business would. So while you're preparing for Skype for Business for that implementation, we ensure that the tool actually uses the same range. We have some of our great partners that have built add-ons based on the tool or a variation of the tool. They're either free or paid for tools. So it's not a requirement to use our tool. You can basically use any tool. I do want to highlight that because we are happy with our partners that are doing this. One of the things
sorry to talk over you here, Cornel.
No, that's fine.
That's really cool. They're actually partners can do their own snap-in. Is there anything a little more you could share about that? Because that sounds really cool.
So we let's see how I'm going to phrase this. So when we have a lot of our customers that are currently running network assessment tools. So we have customers. If you're a large-sized customer, so if I have 100 or 200 sites worldwide, it's going to be a network readiness assessment is not something I run once and then I forget it. They want to continuously monitor their network, and they want to ensure that any issues are spotted right then and not in 3 weeks' time. So some of our partners, and let's say IR, they actually have tools that run 24/7 in a customer's environment. So what we've done is we've worked with IR and with many other partners, by the way, to update their tool to ensure that they too can test against our specific network requirements that we have, against the IP addresses that we use, the ports and protocols that we use. So now, as part of that existing monitoring suite that you have, that will actually also report on potential Skype for Business network quality issues, even before you start implementing Skype for Business. Or just because no one is placing a call at night, doesn't mean I now stop caring about that portion of the network. Should something happen, should a fiber provider decide to sort of cut through all the wires in the middle of the night, I'd like to know that my quality is impacted way before my users are impacted. So that's one of the things that we've done to actively work with those existing partners to ensure that they too can use, actually can test against our targets and our requirements, and that our customers are not required to use yet another tool if they already have a tool.
Gotcha. By the way, we have a late breaking question coming in. Yes, he is wearing an Iron Man t-shirt. Back to you, Cornel.
Thank you. What else would you be wearing, Paul? That's what I ask you. It's Iron Man. Anyway, you see, you're making me look bad because you dressed up in a shirt today. Thank you for that, Paul. Thank you for
I do wear shirts
out.
every day, Cornel.
I know. I don't feel bad about it at all. So you see, you brought me totally off topic. Let's get back to this. So when we were writing a lot of these network readiness assessments, and when we were working on this, we wanted to make sure that this was something you could do in potentially a couple of weeks, right? You don't want to spend 6 months with a customer just looking at a network and possibly delaying a project. So there are certain triggers that we've set. So if you're facing any of these triggers, you will need to investigate further. So when things happen like known issues with existing network equipment, or you need to replace hardware, or you need on-site reconfiguration of equipment or wireless assessments, those kinds of things, that's definitely a nice way to highlight that to your customer, tell your customer, hey, you know what, something's on. We've seen in our tests and in the conversations we've had that you will need to address this. So site A, B, or C is possibly impacted. However, you can proceed with the implementation on all the other sites, and this is a site that requires some advanced investigation, which is usually done by one of our partners or by the customer themselves. And you can really zoom in because of that. You now know, because of this network readiness assessment, that there are possible potential issues. So the one thing, and I like how there's actually like an animation slide. The one thing that we can't stress enough is that when you're working with the network, when you're working with your customer on this network, it's an ongoing process. So we go in, we do a network readiness assessment, in this case an essentials, a standard one. We do any optimization that's needed based on that. If required, you can do an advanced version, like a deeper investigation. You do some optimization, and then something changes. Your customer hires 1,000 people, they acquire something, they buy new routers, and then you need to test again. You need to keep your information up to date. You need to make sure that just because something worked yesterday, since we changed something, it might be impacting quality tomorrow. So you run a quick network readiness assessment again, can be done in a day. Ensure that any changes that you made don't impact quality for your entire company. So this is an ongoing process that you keep doing over and over again. There we go. Let's see. Some of the example timeline and planning. we really expect a standard simple network readiness assessment to take up to 4 weeks. It should be definitely definitely be able to do that in 4 weeks. We usually say it's about 1 week of effort, 4 weeks of time. And that's usually something that's acceptable to customers out there. It can be shorter, can be longer, depending on the size of the customer. But that's usually when you go in, you see what they have, test what they have, and report out on that. I had a whispering that you might have a question.
This is true. We do have some questions coming.
Awesome.
So one of the questions is around Fast Track. As you know, many customers are familiar with Fast Track. Can you just a really quick contrast between what Fast Track is and a network assessment? Is it a part of Fast Track? Is Fast Track a part of network assessment? So customers can kind of understand all these great programs we have.
Absolutely. So Fast Track is, let's generalize here, is helping you onboard onto the Office 365 service. That's what Fast Track can do. It's not, and I do want to emphasize that a lot of people always say Fast Track is free. It's not free. Fast Track is part of our service. So by coming into our cloud, we're more than happy to help you out with any potential issues you have. And we have Fast Track for that. You're not paying additional for that. It's part of the service, and they're helping you out onboarding onto Office 365. So as part of that, they can perform certain onboarding services. So they can do portions of this network readiness assessment. They can definitely help you out with questions you have on that. They can certainly help you out with things like completing a bandwidth calculator, things like that. When we go into the larger, like a network readiness assessment, the way we have it in the Skype Operations Framework, that's something where we do recommend our partners that are out there to come on site and to help you out with that. So yes, Fast Track can definitely be an igniter of a network readiness assessment, but when you're doing one, a complete one, that's usually a partner doing this.
Okay, great. Well, with that, let's go ahead and invite everyone again, if you can. Please go ahead and get your questions in. We'll take some of the ones we have now, and we'll see if we can stump Cornel a little bit. Okay, so one of the questions that's come in is around how much bandwidth we have, and whether or not a network assessment really is only for people with bad networks or known bad networks. It's optional for customers who have a lot of bandwidth. Would you agree with that?
No. Not just because you said it. We have oh, it's so fun to have colleagues. So when we launched OCS 2007, when we had Gurdeep on stage, I remember the famous phrase, "You should just buy more bandwidth and you'll be fine. Just buy more bandwidth." Well, in essence, that wasn't wrong. We know there's more to it than just bandwidth. So we definitely, any customer should run a network readiness assessment always. That's the simple and final answer. If you're very confident that you're absolutely fine, then there's no problem in running our network readiness assessment tool on a couple of your customer sites. It shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes per site. It will immediately tell you what the performance of that network will be. So that's the minimum you could do just to ensure that you're correct. It's definitely, I never get scared about the customer's bandwidth to the internet. I get scared about customers' internal networks, because every customer is very convinced that the internal network is fine, and as long as they have enough bandwidth to the outside, it's going to be fantastic. Run the tool a couple of times, and you'll have your own answer, and it doesn't have to take 6 months. Hope that answers the question.
That's great. The next question coming in is around one of our favorite perennial topics here in the Skype for Business is, should I just go ahead and get ExpressRoute and solve all these problems?
Yeah, so that's always a good question. There's always been a lot of confusion about ExpressRoute, and a lot of people have been talking about ExpressRoute. So what we've done if you go to Skype Operations Framework.com and you go to the Network Readiness Assessment, there's actually a separate deck that explains ExpressRoute. So we do want to emphasize that ExpressRoute can certainly help you when you are having issues connecting to the Microsoft network. So the Microsoft network is a global network, one of the largest, if not the largest network in the world. And basically what you can do with ExpressRoute is to bridge a possible bad gap or a bad connection between your network edge or your router where you're going onto the internet, all the way up to the portion where we have one of our internet connectivity points, the Microsoft edges. They're worldwide. There are multiple per country. We have a lot of them, and it's usually ExpressRoute really is something just to bridge the gap between your router and our router. It's a very small area to go over. Sometimes customers need it. It's not a good situation when you need it. Let's be clear about that. But it doesn't fix things like your wireless issues. It doesn't fix things like a malfunctioning router. It only improves the connection between you and the Microsoft network. So ExpressRoute can certainly help the situation, can certainly improve quality, but it's not a magical fix-all.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So I think definitely customers, those looking at ExpressRoute, you want to do a little more homework on that and figure out if it's a right for you or not. It's not a default yes. Okay. So next question coming in. So we've noticed that Microsoft is adding collaboration and communication features into Teams, things like meetings and video and audio. So if we run the network assessment for Skype for Business, we should be fine for Teams, right? No issues. We don't have to worry about that.
That's partially true. When it comes to a real-time communication test, it absolutely applies to any real-time communication technology. You could even say that if your network is ready for real-time communication, you could even, let's say, implement an Avaya soft client, for all I care. It's about getting ready for that real-time communication. It's getting ready to get a low latency, high quality network. And what you then choose to run on that network, whether it's Skype for Business, whether it's that collaboration with Teams, it's mostly the same. We do have to realize that Teams uses bandwidth in a different way. We have successwithteams.com that has a separate bandwidth calculator on it. The Teams does behave differently when it comes to content and when it comes to using video in that way. So yeah, it does uses bandwidth differently, but so it uses sometimes more, sometimes less. So that is something you have to compensate for. But essentially, when you're running the tool and validating readiness based on the capabilities of your network, you should definitely be good with that single tool for both Skype for Business as well as Teams.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. And the last one is, hey, I upgraded my network last year, and at the end, the vendor, who also happens to be a UC vendor, ran a network assessment and told me my network is great. So I don't need to worry about doing this again, right?
Well, so the interesting thing is whenever I bring my car to the shop, they always say, oh, your car is great. We only need a few fixes. And then they do it. And next year when I come in, they always find new stuff to fix. So it's very interesting how that sort of happens. Whenever I tell them, last year you said everything was fine, there's nothing to fix. Yeah, it's last year. This last year. It's different now. So your network is kind of the same, right? So it's stuff changes, people change, behavior changes. We talked about this continuous process. We talked about this continuous testing and readjusting and monitoring. perhaps someone has become a real big fan of video since last year, and now they're doing video calls all day long. So let's just say you would be in way better shape if you just tested your network and you just validated that you were ready, and you're a year in. You're now a year later. You're definitely in a better position than someone that's just hoping it might work.
I think I totally get what you're saying here. Basically, you should test the network as you're coming in with a new Skype for Business deployment. And in general, regardless if you're doing business with Microsoft or other companies, a continuous approach to network testing is really advisable, since it's a core, it's like dial tone itself, right? You must have your network ready at all times for you to be able to take advantage of business opportunities.
Absolutely. Yes.
Great. You know what? One last question came in. So let me go ahead and grab that. And then I think if there's no other questions, then I think we will probably be wrapping this up. But here's that last question. Okay, Cornel, you've convinced me to have you guys come in and do the network assessment. And you've convinced me that we should have a process for testing the network even when you're not here. Does this mean I'm going to buy a ton of expensive networking tools and then have to hire additional specialists to do this? How would you guys advise me on this?
Well, I do have a PayPal address, so we could work something. No, that's oh, so many red flags. It's so the nice thing, we firmly believe that the foundation for any good real-time communication deployment is a solid network. That's something we believe in and that we work on. So that means that all of the methodology, tools, anything that we talked about today is all provided free of cost by Microsoft. So any of the tools that I talked about, they're all free. You can go to download.microsoft.com. You can search for the Skype for Business Network Assessment tool. You'll find it. It's free to download, free to run. Any training on it, guidance, any of the decks, they're all free. You can use them, and we encourage you to use them. Yes, if you want things like continuously monitoring, if you want things like deep probing, deep Wi-Fi assessments, things like that, yes, that's usually a partner play. You're paying for that additional knowledge that they bring, for that additional experience that you bring, absolutely. But the standard, just testing, if I'm ready for Skype for Business, ready for real-time communication, and do I need further investigation, that's absolutely provided free of cost, included in the service. And we really want to, because we want to encourage that everybody in the world runs a network readiness assessment before implementing any real-time communication tool.
Okay, and I think that is a great last word on this topic. I want to thank everybody for participating in these broadcasts, both in the past and watching us now. It's really important for us to reach out to our IT pros. So I will be signing off from here. So Cornel, if you could say goodbye from Europe.
Goodbye from Europe.
Cornel, that was excellent. And from Redmond campus, goodbye. Thanks, everyone.